like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank. When it's sink or swim, only option is to win. In the murky water, not a thought of giving in. I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank. When it's sink or swim, only option is to win. In the murky water, not a thought of giving in. Welcome to the shrimp tank. Want to put it all together, this is big things. Doing big things, chasing big dreams. Yeah, it's all real, this life's all that it seems. All the chicks scream, all the dudes yell. This is just what I do and I do it well. With the flow fresher than the new shoe smell. Going through hell, but homie, keep going. You know the saying, you can reap what you sow in. So I don't chase girls, I just chase dreams. Play the same game, but we ain't in the same league. Running a campaign, Roadie 2016. Like a phone to die, putting me in charge. I'm a general, from the front, I'ma lead the charge. Like a federal, fell on my lap never. Going hard as ever.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank down here in Boca Raton, Florida. We do this show in collaboration with the FU Adams Center for Entrepreneurship. This is the Oz Digital Studio. So definitely want to catch all these episodes up on my LinkedIn account, Jason R. Hill. We are now streaming live to it, as well as Facebook, the Adams Center page, as well as the Shrimp Tank page at Shrimp Tank Boca. And of course, every week we put our guests up on our website, shrimptankpodcast.com. This is the podcast where we get to interview the best and brightest entrepreneurs from South Florida and really find the do's and don'ts of running a business. I'm joined here with my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cox. So he's going to tell us a little bit about what is going on with FAU. The parking lot is empty today, which is great. We were able to park, and our guest was not having any difficulty getting a spot, so he showed up nice and on time. And before we get into Sam's backstory, being an entrepreneur, Kevin, share with us what's happening at FAU.
Yeah, that's right. This is typically when we do the What's Happening at FAU segment of the podcast. Very exciting, but Jason nailed it. Nothing's happening at FAU. FAU is officially closed for the Thanksgiving holiday, and I'm the only sucker here putting in some work on our wonderful podcast. But we're coming off a big week, right? So Global Entrepreneurship Week last week, all sorts of community events. And Sam joined us on a panel last week at the Tech Runway's signature annual event, the Maverick Reception, where Jason and I were out there doing a couple of live podcasts, not too many, some miniature podcasts. So you may see that information out there. We had Scott Adams, the dean, the department chair. It was a lot of fun. So it'll be kind of nice to wind down a little bit this week and then back to it next week. We'll have exams. And any startup founders out there, I just wanted to add one thing. FAU Tech Runway applications close November 26th. So you're about out of time. Get those applications polished, finished, and submitted. It is a competitive kind of entry into our accelerator. We take students, faculty, and of course, any founder in the South Florida community.
Well, I got to give you some credit. You lead by example, Kevin, because most people would say, oh, no show this week. Right on the Shrimp Tank, FAU is closed, the doors are locked. But you have to lead by example. If you're teaching students that you got to think outside the box, you got to sometimes sacrifice. It's not always about the money. You are proving that point today by being here when you don't have to be here. So that's absolutely awesome. So, Sam, let's get into your story. Sam is the CEO of TriVent Healthcare, and he was up on a panel last week. I got the opportunity to hear from him, but I want our audience to really hear the backstory of TriVent. There's some amazing stats that I read on your website today. So, Sam, welcome to the Shrimp Tank. How's it going?
Thank you, Jason. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. So tell us about TriVent.
Well, I mean, TriVent is a company that's been around for 32 years. I acquired it in 2014, and it was founded by a respiratory therapist and a former patient, a patient who'd been in a coma for 4 months, came out of the coma, was trached and on a ventilator.
Yeah.
They've had a tracheostomy performed and were on life support, and they didn't know what to do with him. So when he eventually rehabilitated and got out of the hospital, he and the respiratory therapist decided to create something, create an entity, an organization that would liberate patients from the ventilator better and faster and with a higher success rate, to provide that gap in care, because there was a significant gap in the healthcare industry.
What did he see the gap was, right? He went through it personally, and a lot of companies that do very well, it's due to, situations they've been through. Like their heart touches it, and like there's such a problem with the healthcare system. Like if I could just do this, and then often they're like, wow, but it's hard, right? Because the healthcare, just getting, through all the red tape is difficult. We see that universities like FAU all the time. Like I was like, oh, I have a great idea to solve a problem. It could be as simple as like figuring out parking issues, right? But it's like, nope, can't figure that out, or the DMV, right? But tell us what he went through that he just saw crystal clear there was a problem.
Yeah. So patients don't rehabilitate in the ICU. Intensive care is intended to stabilize patients and keep them alive. So when it comes to rehabilitation, it doesn't happen in ICUs. The industry's solution 30 years ago was something called a long-term acute care hospital. This is for patients who require an extended stay in a hospital setting. Unfortunately, and those hospitals serve a purpose for those long-term patients, but they have not provided any success with taking care of and rehabilitating patients who are on the ventilator. The results have been subpar. And so that was the gap. They didn't know what to do with him when he came out of the hospital. So they looked to create something that would fill that gap, and they did an admirable job.
So what did they create?
So at the time, they created a company called Special Care Unit. We changed the name back in December to TriVent Healthcare, so we felt it more appropriately described what we do.
It's objectively a better name.
Thank you.
So
yeah,
that's just facts.
Right. So, well, we created a unit that is set up in the acute hospital, the short-term hospital, as we all know them, and we go into the hospital, take over a unit of the hospital. We take those trached vented prolonged mechanical ventilation patients is what they're called, right? PMV, prolonged mechanical ventilation. And we bring those patients into our unit where we can laser focus on their rehabilitation program and getting them off the ventilator.
Okay. So that is kind of the big value proposition.
It is.
Just to care for them and get them off of the ventilator and stay hyper vigilantly focused on that.
Yeah. On average, we'll reduce the length of stay for a patient by about 9 days per episode.
Wow, that's tremendous. That's a long time and a lot of money.
Anybody in healthcare will tell you the last place you want a patient is in the hospital. The people in the hospital want to get the patients out of the hospital as quickly as humanly possible. But in addition to that, we also liberate patients from the ventilator about 40% more often than the national average.
Wow. And how do you accomplish that? What's the difference? What is kind of the secret sauce? What did they discover and how? How does this work?
Yeah. We are able to, again, that laser focus that we talked about, it not only, if you can think about a healthcare environment, okay, the average length of stay in a hospital is anywhere from 2 to 5 days. Now, a patient who's been on prolonged mechanical ventilation, they've been in the hospital 20, 30, 60, 120 days. As you can imagine, there's a little bit of fatigue factor that is involved with that patient population because hospitals are, again, focused on getting patients in and out quickly.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, you may have multiple ICUs in a hospital, and you may have a neuro ICU, you may have a cardiovascular ICU, and in each of those ICUs, medical ICU, post-surgical ICU, in each of those ICUs, you may have one patient who's on prolonged mechanical ventilation. And that is not a best practice. What we've done is we've created this best practice of consolidating those patients into one unit where we can solely focus on the rehabilitation.
Okay. So this is one of the trends we see in healthcare, one of the much broader trends that technology and AI is flowing into, right? It is the specialized medicine, right?
Yes.
Which unsurprisingly has a tendency to yield better results, right? When we talk about the advent and the impending, and has already started. We talked a little bit about on the show last week. Oh, that's right. The host wasn't here last week, but Jason, I'm sure you listened to the episode. And it's one of the things that came up was like personalized medicine, right? So that's kind of the next generation, but you're just focused on specializing really on a specific patient to then pursue and achieve better outcomes and better solutions. That's wonderful.
Yeah. And personalized medicine is fantastic. That's more, I think, about wellness and avoiding hospital visits. Once a patient has been in a traumatic car accident or had a stroke, they're hospitalized, they're there, they're in it, right? And that's where we focus.
Yeah, and there's always going to be a need for that. So it's absolutely really important. That's one of the things that sometimes gets overlooked. You can do all this kind of stuff. I do a fair amount of it and get in a sauna and a cold tub every morning like a psychopath and have some supplements and work out and do this and that. But if somebody's texting and driving and T-bones my car, like, it's not going to matter. It can't get out of the car and be like, but I exercise and I got in a cold tub. I should be fine. So these things, we're still going to have these accidents, these incidents, and there's going to be a need for various medical treatments always.
Sam, can you explain to our audience the type of patients that usually come in? Is it accidents, for example? Is it people that are smoking too much, then they have COPD, and then all of a sudden they need a ventilator? Like, kind of really give our audience the type of people that you guys are handling.
Smoking too much, I think any smoking these days is
Well, you
qualified
have
as too
everything with
much.
vape these days, and then all of a sudden it leads to issues, and then they check themselves into a hospital and need a ventilator. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around what type of patients.
So our patient's diagnosis is respiratory failure, right?
Yes.
The lungs no longer work. They have to go on mechanical ventilation. However, it's respiratory failure secondary to anoxic brain bleed, stroke, cardiac arrest,
Gotcha.
congestive heart failure, trauma, multiple trauma from a car accident. So it can literally come from anywhere within the hospital. I'll give you an example. There are times when a patient gets a lung transplant and the lung transplant goes swimmingly and the patient gets to rehabilitate quickly and go home. Sometimes lung transplants are complicated surgeries and they don't always go perfectly.
Yes.
And so that patient then, even though they have new lungs, they will have to go on to mechanical ventilation. That we take care of those patients as well. In fact, we've done a really great job of getting those patients off the ventilator.
Do you still
See,
see
Kevin, I wasn't that far off. See,
Yeah.
I said a lot of smoking and vape. See, I was close.
So do you still see a fair amount of COVID patients, or not so much anymore?
No, during the height of COVID, we were treating post-COVID patients and rehabilitating those patients who had to go on prolonged mechanical ventilation. But in fact, it's funny. During COVID, we were watching the news just like everyone else, and we would see reports where, hey, if you go on a ventilator and you have COVID, it's lights out. It's bad news for you. During that time, we were liberating COVID patients off the ventilator at a rate of greater than 90%.
Wow, that's incredible. So one of the things we talked about on the panel last week a little bit that I wanted to circle back to is this represents a pretty big industry transition for you. So how did you make that switch? I mean, you're certainly not one of our elder guests, but you're not a young man. I would guess. So you do. I mean, you maintain a very young look, but you're not that young, and it's a big career transition. So what were you doing before TriVent, and what made you make a decision at this point in time to just completely sort of switch industries?
Yeah. So first of all, I look great for 90.
Oh,
Make no mistake of that.
absolutely.
I do. It's odd. I've always considered myself to be the young guy at the table, and now that I'm no longer the young guy at the table, it's a little off-putting.
Yeah, it
But
stinks, doesn't it?
It does. I spent a long career in corporate America. Worked for a couple Fortune 100 companies, in the executive ranks, and I always considered myself an intrapreneur. Right, I was a hired gun, but I was very entrepreneurial within my organizations, and I loved that spirit of entrepreneurship. Eventually, as many people do, they want to lead at a greater pace. And again, in corporate America, there's limitations as to what you can do when you're not the ultimate boss.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is something that I'll touch on because it's important for our listeners and students to understand, entrepreneurship or corporate entrepreneurship, or sometimes called corporate innovation. There's a bunch of synonyms for it, but it is a thing. And that's why when we educate our students here, we try to teach them about being entrepreneurial more in general, as opposed to like, that doesn't always mean, especially when you're just graduating and have no money, starting your own venture. You can apply the same tenets, the same educational concepts within an organization. And there's some upside to that, right? So like I'm the corporate innovation coach for all of JM Families when they do their National Corporate Innovation Challenge. JM Families is really committed to it. Anyone from anywhere, you're talking mechanics in the garages, they can bring an idea to the table and present it to the C-level executives, and sometimes they'll greenlight it. Great organization, a lot of fun, and the benefits of that is the organization possesses a lot of expertise, right? A lot of resources, a lot of financial resources. They have existing customers. There's so many benefits. And then that other part that you were just getting to, though, there's also constraints, right? When you go to loan and launch a venture, you can basically do whatever you want as long as it's lawful or nobody knows about it, right? Within a corporate environment, you've got, the brand image, the brand value, like
Lawyers,
JM Families
lawyers.
isn't just going to let you do anything. And there's going to be some approvals and there's going to be some processes. So there's both an upside in terms of the resources, expertise, customers. There's also those constraints of, right? Like, okay, now we greenlit this, but it's going to take, this timeline to implement it. It's like, really? I wanted to do this now. It's kind of the same things I face all the time here at FAU, but I try to do innovative stuff. It's like, yeah, you can do that. Maybe, what are you thinking? 2028? It's like, no, I need to do it now or it'll be old. It won't be
We
new.
would be at like episode like 8 right now if we just put it through the regular way back in the day, I think.
Yeah, we didn't ask for any approval to start this. We just did it.
I was like, come to my office. We're going to start podcasting and we're going to collaborate with FAU. And Kevin's like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
Look at us now.
Look at you now. You're doing a great job. Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hopefully nobody walks in here and shuts us down, because in theory that could still happen, but I don't think it will. So you were going to tell us, finish about so making this decision. So you felt some of those constraints.
Yeah, undoubtedly. And to your point, well, let me back up to my first interview that I had for a corporate job in corporate America. And the gentleman who interviewed me later told me that this is what sealed the interview. I literally told him that I was kind of lazy and I really struggled with tasks that I could make more efficient. And so I was always looking to make tasks more efficient. He later told me, as I was hired the second I told him that. So that's what we continue today to do today at TriVent Healthcare. It's interesting what you said about JM Family, another fantastic organization, little bigger than TriVent, and how they are taking ideas from everywhere. I'm a true Kaizen approach person. That's the Japanese philosophy of continuous improvement. We are always looking for innovative ideas from anyone, from one of our care techs to a respiratory therapist to our CPA. Anybody in the organization can come up with an idea and we will run it up the flagpole, because we're always right or learning. We're never wrong. We're either right or we're learning.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of best idea wins, right? Like, I don't care if it comes from a freshman student. It's like, hey, have you ever thought about doing it? I will say, absolutely. Tell me more. You know, that sounds like a good idea. I want it. I don't care, where it comes from, how long they've been doing XYZ, because you never really know.
Exactly. Yeah.
But on the flip side, execution, because 99 people don't execute on that idea, and the one person jumps in and does. So let's talk about that for a second. You work for 2 big Fortune 100 companies, but you mentioned earlier that you acquired this company.
Yes.
So tell us about how that went down. How did you acquire it? Did you build up enough savings? Did you use some of your 401k? Right. I know it's not easy to just acquire a company. Typically, I guess 2 weeks ago told us the opposite. You acquire a company for $5,000 because it had so much debt, and then he saved the day and made it profitable. But a lot of businesses always jump the gun to just start a company from scratch, which is, quite hard. I'm a big believer of doing what you're talking about, acquire a company and then go in and fix, the gaps that you saw. You worked for big Fortune 100 companies. You knew how to do that. You had the skill set. So let's talk about that for a moment.
So I've worked with many economic development communities, and have worked in chambers of commerce, and I love public-private partnerships and getting organizations together and people together. So over the years, I've had people approach me and say, "Hey, we like your leadership style. We'd like to invest in you. Let's go find something to buy." Okay, and I always had said, "No, no, 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 no. I'm
Yeah.
perfectly happy. I get runway to do what I want as an entrepreneur within this huge organization." And then finally, I decided it was time to pull the trigger. So I started looking for a company to buy. And what I did was I approached my father's former boss. My father has passed away a long time now, but his former boss, because I had never bought a company before.
Yeah.
I had all these management skills, but I had no acquisition skills. So I approached a gentleman to be my mentor. And he said, "Okay, here's the rules. I'm not going to invest a penny in you, so that I'm truly here to support you and be your mentor." And I respected that, and that's what I wanted. So he started introducing me to companies and people who were aware of companies that were for sale. Well, I met a local Boca Raton leader, and we started looking at a company, and he said, "Okay, forget these other guys who want to invest in you. We're going to go buy something together." And so we started kicking the tires, probably looked at about 30 different companies. And when we came across TriVent Healthcare, which was then Special Care Unit, I absolutely fell in love. Number one, all of the financial metrics made sense, but this company fulfilled me. The people that I work with save lives every single day. And I couldn't believe that we were filling a niche in the healthcare industry and doing it so well that literally we were changing people's lives. So this met all my parameters. So we went ahead and pulled the trigger and acquired a minority interest in the company, and a majority interest in the growth. And now I have two fantastic partners, one of which is one of the founders, and one of which is
How big was the company back then, and how big is it today?
we're about the same size as we were. As with any company, when you're entrepreneurial by acquisition, you have to sort of evaluate the situation. So we took a couple steps back, and of course, COVID hit, and there's really no growth during COVID.
Sure.
All we did was save more people's lives, which was fantastic. So coming out of COVID, however, it really shined a spotlight on the need for incredible care for prolonged mechanical ventilation patients. And so our pipeline is quite full right now, and we're working on some pretty significant growth.
So just so I want our audience to really understand it, how many approximate employees work for the brand? How many states how many hospitals are you in?
We're currently in 2 states. We have about 100 employees.
Okay. And what 2 states? Florida
And Alabama.
And Alabama. Okay. And then going back to the acquiring it, because a lot of entrepreneurs want to do this, right? They search for a business, but like, okay, well, I need money, right? And I'm a financial advisor, so I'm like, you go to the SBA, right? But that's capped at 5 million. Get private financing from the person selling it, which is pretty cool. So you get 5 million. I've seen those type of deals go down. Obviously, you can find an investor, an angel investor, to come into the deal, and sometimes they're silent, or a partner that wants to do the business with you. But you have to sometimes think outside the box, right? You came, from the other side, and this is your first time doing it, and you had to really find a mentor to really coach you through it, right? And make sure you don't screw this up, right? You could literally,
Absolutely.
just sign a contract, and one line in that contract could be off, and you could be screwing yourself, right? And you don't know, because you've never done it before. So kind of explain, like, how did you get the financing? This is a big company, right? Once you start going after companies that have 50 plus employees, like, and you're going out to do something and get majority interest or a piece of the company, it's not easy financially. So how were you able? Was it just self savings, or did you have to do it in a unique way?
Yeah,
with
as I had said before, I had really never had been interested in
Yeah.
acquiring a company. So I had my 401k, I had my savings, I was getting ready for an eventual retirement, and when I finally decided to pull the trigger, it was because investors approached me. So I was super lucky in that regard.
Yeah.
Right.
That's like one out of 1,000.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it helps be lucky.
Okay.
Yeah. So I am so glad this is coming up on the show again, because I said a couple weeks ago, entrepreneurship through acquisition seems to be something that's currently overlooked in terms of educational offerings and support, right? A lot of brokers don't have a great reputation, and just people don't know too much about it. But I am betting, and we'll find out if I'm right or not, I could be totally wrong, that there's more people like Sam out there. So one of the newest initiatives, which I'll go ahead and announce, even though it's not fully planned, for summer 2024, offered by the FAU Adams Center for Entrepreneurship, is an advanced, complete, comprehensive seminar on ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition. So if you're a corporate warrior out there and you've kind of just had enough, or you're looking for a change, but you don't know, like, where do I go? What do I do? We're building a great program. I'm spending a lot of time on it and thoughtful things, and I'm bringing some people in because I'm not an expert on it either. So some national leaders in the space, and it should be a really great program. We're going to have it 3-day program, so a comprehensive like weekend seminar, and more info on that will be available soon. This is another way to do entrepreneurship.
Kevin, that sounds really exciting. In fact, I wish you had that 10 years ago.
Yeah. I keep hearing that from people. That's like, yeah, well, that would have saved me a lot on my first one, but now I've bought 4 or 5 and learned a lot of those lessons the hard way. So we're going to bring in some of those guest speakers to talk about those hard lessons, so that way the next generation could say, well, I know to avoid that. I remember the story told by XYZ. So it should really be a great program, and again, something I'm hopeful we can build a reputation on, because again, it seems to be kind of overlooked. That's why I'm building it. That's also why we have our Spanish language boot camp. I didn't see any of that in our community. We try to do things that are unique here, which, selfishly helps our rankings, reputation, PR, because it's like, wow, what are they doing? It's a little bit different. Every center has pitch competitions and mentors, and I'm always looking to say, well, what can we do? It's going to be a little bit different and really add value. So hopefully this community comes out and supports. Whenever you try something new, you never really know. I hope there's not 3 people sitting in there, but we're going to do it either way.
Well, it's definitely a growing trend. I just read in Forbes that entrepreneurship by acquisition from newly minted MBAs is a growing trend, as they are growing tired of trying to found companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We see data, we see evidence, we see search funder, regional groups are kind of emerging everywhere. So that's what I've noticed too. That's what I'm betting on. We'll see.
Well, you got a lot of baby boomers that have businesses and they don't have a succction plan, right? So
that's the
a
other
lot of
side
private
of the
financing
coin.
is going to go down.
There's going to be a lot of businesses for sale, as our old colleague Roland knows from his family business research. The overwhelming
He's prepping for a buy.
Yeah, the overwhelming majority of those don't go to the next generation. There's so many kids I have in my classes. I ask them what they want to do, and their family owns a business. I say, well, what are you going to do when you graduate? And their singular answer is not that. And they don't usually have an answer, but they know they don't want to do the family business because it's been at the dinner table, it's been after school, they probably work there, and they are just tired of it by the time they're 20, 22. They're like, anything but that sounds good. So I see it a lot.
Awesome. Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break to hear from one of our sponsors, and when we get back, we're going to jump into our hot or not segment of the show.
Look, Google is smart, but owls are wiser. Instead of spending an hour sifting through ads and clickbait BS, get the answers you need from qualified experts immediately. What is OWL? Think a best-of edition of Google, Cameo, and Clubhouse, all rolled into one app. OWL is an app where you can get advice through secure, private, live voice calls, tailored specifically to your questions, and all in real time. Need marketing or PR advice? OWL it. App or software development? OWL it. Healthcare, investing, social media, grant writing, education? OWL it. Coming soon. Owl, one-on-one with sports legends, singers, actors, celebrities, and more in real time. That's super exciting. Woo. Who? Owl. That's OWWLL. 2 W's for twice as wise. 2 L's because you'll really love it. Owl. Connect. Learn. Grow. Now available for Apple or Android. Download Owl today on the App Store on your device. Woo.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Shrimp Tank. As a reminder, go ahead and reach out to Sam on the Owl app next week. We will feature him, and you could follow him, and you will receive a notification when he makes himself available to take calls. We're the only podcast that you could chat one-on-one with our guests and really pick his brain about anything that we discuss during the show. And how important is it to build relationships? I mean, Sam was just mentioning how he got lucky, but it was not luck. He went out there, and he shook a lot of hands. He met a lot of people for coffee, I bet. And eventually, he sounds like he got lucky, but it really was through all these relationships, and people really had faith, in partnering with him. Is that correct, Sam?
Yeah, my advice on relationships is make it intentional
Yes.
and make it authentic, because you can shake a lot of hands and drink a lot of coffee, and if it's not an authentic
Correct.
feel, then it's not going to go anywhere.
And that's why I built Owl. It was just like everything is not as authentic through DMs on messages and text messages. And with Owl, you could just have a one-on-one conversation, not be recorded, and generally get to meet people and build connections and relationships. So on this segment of the show, it is called Hot or Not. We're going to jump into a topic. We got Kevin laughing over here because he always changes this. He hates this part of the episode. He is like, what is hot? What's not hot? What's overrated? What's underrated? Oh, Kevin, you're up. You're going to knock out this first question for Sam, but you got to keep it in the format hot or not, just so Sam really stays on track.
Oh yeah, I love the
easy
format. So I do have one for Sam. Matter of fact, based on some info I got from him on the panel last week. So enrollments in universities has tapered just a hair. Well, that's because it's inversely correlated with the job market, right? The job market is good. Enrollment goes down a little bit, right? The job market is bad, enrollment goes up. So, hot or not, getting an MBA?
Hot.
Tell us why. and do you have any experience with that?
As a matter of fact, I'm a proud graduate of the FAU Executive MBA program. Look, the knowledge that you get from an MBA is different from the knowledge you get on the street. It is important, and it's not something you can learn out of a classroom. Now, what I loved about the MBA program here, particularly the executive MBA program, our cohort was a brilliant group of MBA candidates from throughout industry, and so I got to learn from people in multiple industries, multiple companies at differing levels of executive leadership. And that was just as informative. And I've remained friends with and peers with my cohort. We still meet regularly and learn from each other.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm so glad you didn't just say like the food or the coffee, right? Because
the food was not that good.
Yeah, the executive MBA though, it's fancy. They do cater.
Oh no,
they do
that food was good.
Stuff. They really take care of that group. But it's interesting. It goes back to those relationships that you mentioned, Jason. And yeah, I have a master's degree as well from University of Florida, and then my PhD is from right here at FAU. So I'm a big proponent of education, but also understand the importance of practical education as well. And that's kind of the manner in which I try to teach is very practical and applied, as opposed to some of the more theoretical stuff, which can be useful, but I'll leave that to the brainier faculty with their lofty ideas. I do like to, get my hands dirty in the streets with the founders.
Sure do. Right. We're going to be launching our new studio in January. I'm excited. So you're getting dirty right here in the Shrimp Tank studio. We're going to have probably the coolest studio in the whole country when we're done, I think, with a whole live audience.
At least the best studio in South Florida. All right?
Yeah,
we'll start there.
It's going to be hard to beat the winds. The wind is kind of nice out in Vegas. I will say, with their whole backdrop. But we're starting it off the 2.0, and one day we'll get to the 3.0 and have the nicest one. Deal?
Yeah.
Okay, deal. Okay, Sam.
Yes.
What about the Affordable Care Act? Right? Do you think it's hot or not? Right? It's been around for a long time. Obviously, when it first rolled out, everyone absolutely hated it on a majority, right? And it's kind of a little better these days. But Affordable Care Act, from your beliefs, hot or not?
I'm going to say misunderstood.
Okay.
The Affordable Care Act did a lot of things, and unfortunately, a lot of people thought it was going to be insurance for all. It was the largest expansion of insurance, undoubtedly. Um, it was funded by a removal or a reduction in something called DISH, disproportionate share. Now, what hospitals were doing is they get Medicare reimbursements, and if you had walk-ins off the street, right, uninsured patients, at a rate that was higher than the national average, you would get an increase in your Medicare reimbursements, something called disproportionate share. In the industry, it's called DISH. The Affordable Care Act was partially funded by a reduction in DISH because the theory was everybody will have insurance, so you won't need this disproportionate share. Well, unfortunately, what has happened is people initially flocked, got the insurance. Once they go into the hospital, they stop paying for the insurance. So they become uninsured. The hospitals now are and have been bearing the burden of this without any disproportionate share revenue. So it has put a real strain on the industry in that regard. I think I said, so what I think I'm meaning is not.
Yeah, not.
Not.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about that so our listeners can better understand, and so I can better understand your business model. So now I'm curious, right? So where do your customers, or I should correct that, whenever it's medical and I'm talking to founders, patients. So do your patients, do their family and friends or themselves like Google and say, how do I get off this ventilator? What's the best treatment option? Or do you partner with hospitals and they just refer, because they know that you're best at it? Or is it a combination of? Tell us a little bit about the actual patient acquisition process.
Yeah. So if you can imagine, there's a patient who is in ICU, prolonged mechanical ventilation. The hospital's goal is to get that patient better. The hospitals with which we partner, they will transfer that patient out of the ICU into our unit so that we can rehabilitate them.
Okay.
Now, other hospitals can also refer those patients to us. And of course, we have community outreach people who are educating other hospitals, patients' families, insurance providers on our services so that they can request a transfer into our unit.
Yeah, and I'm betting insurance providers, once they learn about this, they are big fans of you, not just because they care so much about those patients, but also because of that timeline you mentioned, getting people into recovery and out of care units that they would otherwise have to reimburse for.
Yeah. Not only are we more efficient in getting the patient out of the hospital and better, there's a key statistic, something called readmission rates.
Oh, yeah, this is big. For those who don't know, I've worked with some health tech companies, and these are immensely expensive. These are this is what keeps hospital administrators up at night. That rate goes up, your hospital grade goes down. It's very costly. It is like their number one KPI. They do not want readmission. So yeah, tell us about that.
So as a matter of fact, if you can imagine, these patients are medically complex, multiple comorbidities. These are the highest rate of readmission patients in the industry. So these patients readmit at a rate of about 35% of the time. Our readmission rate is less than 6%.
Wow.
Well, there you go.
That's why it's all over your bio, website. Like everywhere I went, I was looking at the marketing this morning, and I was like, I was Googling things, so it all makes sense.
Yeah, that should be all you need to get a partnership with a new hospital, right? I've had some other.
It moves the needle.
Yeah, some tech companies that as soon as they mention that, everything stops and they're like, tell us more.
Okay, but then I got to beg the question then is why are you not expanding to other states then? If they see these numbers, and they're like, look what you're doing at this specific hospital, what is the difficulty getting in? And I probably know the answer. It's like everything else. There's so much red tape, right? It's not so easy. But what's stopping these other hospitals for taking you up on the offer, for example?
So one of the beautiful things about the United States is I have access to data here.
Yeah.
I can tell you the results for every hospital and what it looks like, because everybody feeds data into a central repository, and our entire country has access to that data.
Okay.
The bad news is the data for the patients I serve is really bad. So, and we provide a fantastic solution for that. In fact, the best solution on the planet, perhaps in the galaxy.
Okay.
However, I've had hospital CEOs tell me, stop telling me how ugly I am. Right. So I struggle with ego all the time.
Got it.
And that's, as an entrepreneur, that's a major speed bump that I have to figure out how to navigate.
Yeah.
So,
And we've absolutely faced some of that too. There's a physician-led company locally, an alumni from our accelerator company called SOAP, whose focus was on collecting really rigorous and comprehensive family medical history, which, most personal physicians, they'll have you write it down when you start there, but like it's just on a paper, it goes into some file, and like it's not used for much, but like, depending on who you ask, 60%, 60 to 80% of health outcomes can be tied to genetics, and that's family history. So his sell-through was through physician offices to just have people put it into a computer, go to an algorithm. It goes back to that personalized healthcare that it's like, well, yeah, most people need a colonoscopy if you're a man at like 40, but like based on your medical history, we're going to start at 30 because we see these multiple risk factors, family history, this and that. But what he's essentially kind of saying to the physician is, right now you're doing kind of a bad job, which is true. That's not how you sell stuff to physicians who are experts and who care so much about their patients, and they do really, really try to do a good job. You show up and you're like, hey, you're doing a terrible job. So that took a lot of nuances of like, how do we do the messaging? How do we kind of not say that, but also improve the patient outcomes by collecting a comprehensive history and then running it through AI and then coming up with a personalized kind of approach.
And how many years, how long does it take to actually like get a hospital onboarded, right? Because if you're switching like to a unit at the hospital, I get the sense like not easy. They have to shut down something at the hospital. These things are full. So it's always like, tomorrow we'll do it. Tomorrow we'll do it. And you're like, today we need to do it, not tomorrow. And I'm sure that you run into that issue, especially like places like New York City. Like they're always filled to the brim.
Our sales cycle is longer than 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. So that's such a struggle. Good thing, sometimes at FAU, we got folks like Kevin Cox who just get things moving quicker, right? So if you're out there and you want to partner with FAU, go through his doors, not through the dean or the president's doors, of course. Well, Sam, we're going to take a quick commercial break, hear from one of our sponsors. When we get back, we're going to jump into our Plead, the fifth segment of the show.
Step into our state-of-the-art innovation lab and create your digital future. Oz uses cutting-edge technology and 22 years of industry knowledge to enhance customer experience through digital innovation in a variety of expertise. Oz is a leading global consulting company whose services and solutions are trusted by startup, mid-size, and even Fortune 500 companies. Get to know more about Oz's Salus, a mobile solution bringing us back to max capacity, and their latest solution, Rainmaker, saving insurance companies years of work. To learn more about Oz and their exciting technologies, visit followoz.com. That's FOLLOWOZ.com.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank. As a reminder, you catch all these episodes up on our website, shrimptankpodcast.com. And of course, every week we are live on all our socials these days. So, Sam, on this segment of the show, it is called Plead the Fifth, right? You could only plead the fifth one time. If you do it 2 times, then of course, every week we say that we just can't air your episode. We're gonna have to take it off the website. So be careful. You want to be up on our website long term, of course. So let's talk about staffing for a little bit. We didn't talk about your staff, right? You're chugging along during COVID, right? Lots of times they want to see growth. You're right. You're a new company. Bonuses are promises. Expectations like, oh, I'm with TriVent Health. Like, we believe in this. We're saving lives. But often, you have to say, you got to wait. It's going to happen. We're going to have that explosion, right? So let's talk about just the most difficult employee you've had to deal with that, either you had to let go or had to give them a raise, you had to something you went through with staffing, because as a new, CEO, right, that's something you may not have dealt with in the Fortune 100 environment, right? Because now all of a sudden, like you don't want people to leave. It's such a struggle for businesses to scale through talent, of course, with their organization. So talk about a story when it comes to one of your employees.
Well, what I would say is I'd go back to a previous career where I had a fantastic team of like 6 people. Every single person deserved to get promoted and move up. I was in the way because I needed to move on in order to give them room to grow.
Interesting.
And so ultimately I left, right? So I grew the team and then I exited so that I in this case, I just moved to another state, but I gave them the room to grow. Yeah, in a small business now today, we definitely struggle with that. And the good news is the story of our growth is there. You can see it, you can feel it. We engage our leaders in the process of growth. They get to do pitches with us. They get to plan the growth. So we're involved right now in a project. I can't discuss it, but we're about to grow a little bit, and it's going to provide opportunity, and everybody is involved in it in the organization.
Let's just talk about again, being a new CEO, what is the hardest thing you've went through with employees, right? Often, everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. They're like, oh, I'm going to be an awesome entrepreneur, an awesome leader. They watch all these videos on social media and they write down all these quotes, they journal it out. In the real world, it just does not work like that. The hardest thing that we see in this Shrimp Tank studio week after week is that people can't, find good employees. Then when they do find good employees, keeping them satisfied. And often we hear, these stories come out of the entrepreneurs in here that like that was the hardest thing running their business that they didn't see coming, right? And that could be yours. I don't know, but just tell us like how hard it was to transition from a Fortune 100 company to then starting to have to scale your business with employees and be that leader.
I really haven't struggled with it, and I'll explain why.
That's good.
I'll explain why. So during COVID, we saw nurses, respiratory therapists were leaving to get these rich contracts if they would travel, right? We didn't suffer from that at all. I think we lost 2 part-time employees to contract work. And I believe it's because we offer a fulfilling environment. Again, these caregivers got into healthcare because they wanted to see patients get better, right? And in our organization, you get to watch that patient rolled in on a gurney, sometimes not even responsive, and you get to see them walk out.
That's awesome.
At the end. So there's some pretty significant satisfaction there. But in addition to that, if you talk to a lot of caregivers in hospitals, they're so slammed because hospitals are so understaffed. They don't get to work through the entire scope of their professional training. In our organization, you are absolutely going to get to work through the entire scope of your professional training. So your mind is engaged. You're engaged in the business, in the care of the patients. So my toughest thing is, again, I'm a huge. Not only did I fall in love with the outcomes of our company, I fell in love with our staff. Again, these people save lives every single day, and I'm just enamored. I'm smitten with my team. So we recently had someone who had room for growth. In fact, she had just finished her MBA, and I didn't have anywhere for her to grow. And so we remained friends, and we hugged her on the way out, and she found a great job, and I fully supported that. But you can't always, number one, you never want to stand in the way of someone's growth, right? I believe that comes back to you when you release them to the universe and just let them be great somewhere else because they've already been great for you. And I don't know how else to answer that.
All right, so let's ask some other questions. Let's go back to your time at corporate entrepreneurship. One of the things I like to talk about when I teach that stuff to students in our MBA program is, although you're with a large organization, like it's not going to fail, like a JM Families or a Southern Wine and Spirits. That doesn't mean there's no risk, right? So if you're in there doing that entrepreneurial stuff in a corporate environment, it can still absolutely fail. So there are risks, reputational risk, even employment risk. I know this well. There was one time I almost got fired from here. So tell us about your biggest failure in one of those roles where you thought you really were onto something, and then it turned out, that didn't really play out so well.
I want to hear about you almost getting fired.
I do too.
I had a problem to solve in a timely manner. And I did something that wasn't entirely legal from a financial perspective, but it was just a means to an end. And it was to fulfill another obligation that I was also legally had to fulfill. So I made a fake purchase order for the university. You don't want to do that.
Okay, I'll give you a good example. We were looking at different technologies, and I hadn't had full approval to buy this piece of technology. It was $80,000. So I put it on my corporate Amex.
Oh,
Yeah, I got in trouble for that one for sure.
okay.
Yeah.
So it's not really that dissimilar of a scenario.
those are similar.
I had approval, but I couldn't get this piece of paper I needed, which is always the thing around here is a
Right.
form, a paper.
Yeah, I didn't have a PO. I didn't have nothing.
Yeah.
just
So I
paid
was
for it.
like, well, let me take this
Same
other
job.
one and erase some stuff
Yeah.
and then edit it. And here's one I found that isn't a real one. Yeah. So sometimes you got to get this stuff to do the job.
Wow, that was a good one.
I haven't pleaded the fifth yet. I'm getting
Okay. Well,
Okay, this is easy.
Yeah.
How much did you spend to acquire this company back in 2014, or plead the fifth? Tell us the amount.
okay. That was easy. I plead the fifth.
There we go. We got him.
great.
Be careful what you
That's
wish for.
wonderful,
Right.
because now my next question is going to be about telling us and our listeners about that secret project you referenced. No, just kidding. All right. So how long have you been in Boca?
Well, I lived in Pompano since 1971,
Okay.
and outside of going to the University of Florida for a few years and then spending 5 years in Las Vegas, I've lived in South Florida. Well, that's not true. In 7 years in Tampa, but other than that, I've been in South Florida my whole life, and our corporate office has been in Boca Raton for about 4 years.
Okay. And that time you said Boca Raton, but earlier in the podcast, and why I asked was because you said Boca Raton, and that's
Oh.
usually
That's us New Yorkers.
Yeah.
I said it
That's
for like
a-
2 years on the podcast, and then
and I
Kevin
never
made me
told him.
change it. Kevin made me change it. He's like, it's Raton. I was like, whatever. I'm like, everyone up in New York says Raton.
All right. So what's the be all end all goal with TriVent? I'll ask another tougher one, right? National expansion, IPO, or just double the size and sell it and ride off into the sunset. What do you want to do here?
We want to save as many lives as we can. We
Good
want
answer.
to touch as many patients who have suffered from prolonged mechanical ventilation. If you can imagine for a second, one of our patients was a healthy swimmer, and he was swimming in the morning, doing his daily laps, and he had congestive heart failure in the pool and drowned.
Oh.
Okay. This was a healthy, active man, and he woke up on mechanical ventilation and a tube down his throat and eventually a tracheostomy. That is a terrifying experience for a patient. And what we do is help those people get their lives back. So literally touching as many people as we can. Look, I made good money in corporate America. This is a passion project for me. Of course, it's a business and it has to make money, but it's ultimately, and we will grow, because if you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's because we want to touch as many patients across our country and across the globe as we can. That's our focus. I don't have a plan to IPO. I don't have a plan to sell to private equity. Nothing. Okay.
Okay.
Honestly, it's about saving lives.
Jason hated that story because he swims every morning.
I did. You saw me like,
I
oh
saw his
no.
face over
I'm
there.
like-
He's like, oh, is this gonna be me one day?
I literally was
Jeez.
thinking that. I was like, oh no.
Yeah, he turned a little peek in there for a minute.
Imagine being in a
Now
business.
every time I swim, I would be like,
Is this the day?
don't do it today. Don't do it today.
No, imagine being in a business where you never want anybody you know or love or care about to be your customer, right?
Yeah.
That's us.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a great show today.
Yeah, but I love his answer because so often everyone gets, trained like you have to have an exit strategy on your pitch deck. You have to, have your 10-year plan where you're going to be. And I'm like, no, you don't. Right. Like you could just want to have your company and sail into the sunset. You want to continuously be the CEO. You want to one day figure it out and step down and take a lower role, but still be part of the brand. Like everyone always kind of gets sucked into the old school strategies of what, angel investors and VC say on a pitch deck. And I'm always like, no, I was like, you don't have to always like, yes, if you want funding from them, you got to sometimes play it like that. But you just, it doesn't always have to be like that. And, I like that answer because, you made your money in the early years. And we see that a lot with entrepreneurs and including myself, right? Like I'm a financial advisor still to this day, but I want to make a bigger dent on this world. So I created Owl, right? And, it's not always like about, the fancy car and the lifestyle of like traveling around the world in a jet, right? Sometimes it's about, saving lives,
Yeah.
right? And in our case with Owl, it's about just building more meaningful relationships and connections through one-on-one audio calls, which is missing because of all the text messaging, and emailing going on. So we're trying to get Kevin Cox more to that model here with all his students.
That's right.
You
Call me on Owl. Don't send me another email.
Call him on Owl.
I have enough. I'm full.
A 14-minute email could be done in 1 minute with a conversation with Kevin Cox, on Owl, of course. Well, Sam, thank you for joining us on the Shrimp Tank. For our audience listening, what is the best route if they want to get in touch with your company?
Well, I mean, the Owl app, of course.
Oh,
but outside of that, the traditional email is
perfect.
Is that works. TriVentHealthcare.com is our website.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us on the show. Everyone listening, we'll be back next Wednesday at around 10 a.m. Take care.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank. When it take a swim, only option is to win. In the murky water, not a thought of giving in. Welcome to the shrimp.